Newsfirst, Newsline with Faraz, Shauketaly.
And a very good evening to you. This is Newsline Live. We're broadcasting, as we almost always do, from the Newsfirst studios in Dawson Street in Colombo. This evening, all the way from Muratua, in the Colombo district, SJB candidate Mr. Eran Wickramaratne is with us. Good evening to you, Mr. Wickramaratne.
Good evening.
How's things doing out in Muratua and suburbia?
Yeah, well, I've been focusing on the whole Colombo district at one level, and because I'm managing the campaign nationally, I've been traveling through the districts and assisting Sajid Premadasa in the campaign. So I've been traveling in about 10 districts across the country. Usually after a presidential election, it gets to kind of go in the direction of the newly elected president.
Right.
But this is 8 months after that, and people have lots of things to consider, including the track record of the last 8 months. And I would say that it is increasingly looking more and more favorable. So we started with if you want, a much worse situation, and it's increasingly looking more and more favorable.
And I think, we need to ask the main question, really. How do you intend beating the Rajapaksa family party, the SLPP? How do you intend beating them at the elections?
I don't think there is one answer to it, right? But I think particularly in the post-COVID Sri Lanka and the situation we are presently facing, I think the economy comes number one. People are concerned about incomes, they're concerned about jobs, they're concerned about their immediate future. And I think the real question to ask is, how are we going to actually get out of the crunch that we are already in? If you look at 2020, the global economy, according to the World Economic Outlook of the IMF, is going to shrink by 4.9% minus growth. The US is about 10% minus growth, Britain is about 8% minus growth. So the major markets of the world are beginning to shrink. Our economy is very much tied in with the international economy, right, and markets like that. If you take Sri Lanka, right, this government got elected in November. They made some very, very rash decisions without study.
You talk about the tax reduction?
Yes. So for example, Sri Lanka's revenue, right, should have been about 1.9 trillion rupees. They will lose about 1/3 of it, about 600 billion rupees out of that. So that's one. Then you have the budget deficit, which will probably trend towards 9.5–10% negative. Then you have your reserve position, right, which is probably sinking. We don't have all the data, but I feel that must be at a low level because the reserve position, a year ago was about $7.5 billion, and it's shrinking.
Mr. Wickramaratne, if I was to ask you three policy items, or three items that your party will implement to get Sri Lanka's economy going again and to sustain it.
Yeah, I think there are two phases in this. One is, right, there's a 2-year recovery phase and there's a 3-year growth phase.
2 years?
2-year recovery phase and a 3-year basically growth phase. I think the challenges that are being faced are unprecedented. Anybody shouldn't try to make it look simple or come and say we have all the answers. It is an unprecedented challenge any government will face. Really, the question is, do you have the right team? And do you have the right policies? And these two are important because you can...
Do you have the right team now? With the emphasis on the word now.
Yes, I'm glad you asked this question because I really think that we have the best team. And I would say, look at the other teams that are in the fray. And if you talk about the government today, right, only the two names that come up is Gotabaya Rajapaksa and Mahinda Rajapaksa. No other name actually even surfaces in the government team. If somebody asks who actually is in charge of the economy, everybody keeps looking up and down because they're not sure who is in charge of the economy. Right? So that is why I said, if you're looking at a team, right?
I heard what you said, that you have the right team. But, the downside is that people look at past experience, the track record. And the track record is that in the last government, for whatever reason, not much happened in terms of the economy.
Yeah.
There's FDIs down and so on and so forth. So what is different now in this new team from the previous team?
Yeah, so Shaukat, I think we need to look at it in balance. If you look at the previous team, right, that was there in government, right, most of the power concentration was between the president and the prime minister, and he had some senior people out there, right? I mean, people look at people like myself or Harsha De Silva or somebody, and they,
but you were not in the cabinet.
That's right, we were not given the responsibilities of that sort to make those kinds of decisions.
Was that a political decision?
I'm just making a point. I don't want to be personal.
All right.
Personally,
let's not waste time on that.
That's right.
Yeah.
Just making the point that so this team that we have, right? In a team, you need experience, and then you need new blood. You need mature people. You need older people. You need specialities. You need people who can handle the economy, people who can handle defense, people who can handle education, people who can have health, and so forth and so on.
And people who are not encumbered with corruption.
Not encumbered with corruption, and I would go one step further, and I would say I've always taken this position that people with business interests must not serve on a cabinet in the country. It doesn't matter which government, which political party, because there are conflicts of interest, and I've always taken this strong position. If they are coming into cabinet, then all those business interests must be put in trust. Lots of countries have these places.
But what's the point? They just put it into their kiddies' names or their spouses' names.
No. I'm talking about very transparent processes other countries have, and
I remember that in the United Kingdom, many years ago, when the government there was unhappy with Mohammed Al Fayed and with his ownership of Harrods, which included Harrods Bank, they forced him to place Harrods Bank with a trustee, not some trustee who was his choice, but it was a government choice. Do we have an equivalent here?
No, we don't, Faraz, and that's some of those things that we need to put in place. We cannot leave room for conflicts of interest. This whole issue of corruption comes through this process. We have to clean it up. If you look at a team, Faraz, I will never claim that any team is perfectly clean. I won't claim that. It will be idiotic. But look at it relatively. I think we've got a good team. And as I said, if you look at the balance in the team, it's really, I mean, this is a little bit like in 1977 when J.R. Jayawardena basically came forward and said, we want to make a change. This is my team. It had mature people, it had younger people, it had a balance, it had this different skill sets in that team, and that's how actually they progressed and they were able to make the change. So I think that we definitely have the team, and I would challenge anybody to actually compare our team with any other team, and this is a complex world for us. This idea that one person can solve all our problems, we have to just get out of this thinking. Terrorism you can solve by shooting. A health problem you can't solve by shooting. An economic problem you can't solve by shooting. So you need experts in each of those fields, and also as leaders we need to have the humility and the intelligence to understand that you need all those people to get the best result.
And one of our viewers is asking us, are you confident that the SJB will be able to form a government? Please clarify.
Yes. Faraz, we are working non-stop, right? It will be silly of me to just say we'll get X number of seats or Y number of seats, and I'm not into that. But the way it is trending at the moment and the momentum that's building at the moment, right? We have certainly surpassed every other opposition group. There's no comparison even. The research is showing that the SJB is just skyrocketing ahead of everybody else. The question that's being asked there is, but how far are you getting with the present government? Right? And really, I am unable to really answer that question. The question is, who can get 113 in forming a government? You say, who can get 113? They started to plant a story saying, oh, they're looking for 2/3. Really the question is, we are both racing to see who gets 113.
Now, I wanted to ask you something else about that. As a banker, Why is there, so you can answer this question, why is there businesses of various descriptions are complaining that they are not being accommodated by their respective bankers, although there's all this liquidity around in the market? What's the issue? Why are they not getting their working capital loans and so on?
Yeah. So banks have two sides of a balance sheet to manage. Bankers have depositors' money, and then they take that and they have to lend it to borrowers. They're responsible to make sure that depositors not only get their interest, that they get their capital back. Right? And the Sri Lankan banking system has worked very well. And I have a highest respect, being a banker myself, of how they have actually managed it. Now, the banking system mustn't be put to risk. Banks must be protected first, otherwise businesses can't be protected.
And therefore, is it a situation that the central bank must provide some guarantees to the banks so that they can lend to these businesses who they know may not be able to pay, but they need some security?
No, Faraz, you are beginning to sound like the President Gotabaya Rajapaksa.
Oh dear.
Right? It is not the job of the central bank. It has only two functions: financial sector stability and also inflation and monetary policy. It's the job of government. So you might have liquidity.
So you mean the treasury now?
Yes, because you might have liquidity in the system, but liquidity alone can't solve it. It's a question of risk. Who takes the risk? So if the government, right, has to step in and say, we will share in the risk, and if the government were to give, and there are various levels of comfort, various levels of risk and guarantees that the government can give, and if they were to give the banks that, right,
if you were in power, and Mr. Premadasa asked you to run the finance ministry, what measures would you take to address this situation and provide, what kind of guarantees are we talking about?
Yes, so on the local side, and you're talking of firms and companies and so forth, right, we will look at a few things. One is we will look, and we have said this in our manifesto, and particularly the tourism industry, we have mentioned
very challenging.
We have mentioned it. First is to give them a debt moratorium, a period from which...
But we gave 6 months, and then that's not
2 years.
working.
No, we have suggested 2 years to start with. This problem is not a 3 months, 6 months problem for us. Tourists are not going to come.
I'm glad you're saying that, because BA and Qantas and all these airlines have stopped using the 747-400s. I keep going on about it, but they've retired their fleet 4 years earlier because they understand that the pre-COVID-19 levels of travel will not return for another 3 years.
It won't return. I mean, it would be stupid to think that it will return. People will fly, right, if they're on business or if there's a family emergency. They're going to wait. They don't want to be confined in a small space, which would be realistic, right? Until there's a vaccine or something comes around. Or the industry might change. Like having cruise ships, we may have to have airships. These things will happen. The industry will change. So I think we have a 2-year problem and a 3-year growth thing, and we need to think.
So for you, your party will say a 2-year moratorium, especially at least for the tourism industry.
Yes, and
what about manufacturing?
No, and also just not only the moratorium, and we will have to go for extended credit terms. Manufacturing is the same. They will need it, but in manufacturing, one of the things we need to do is to become competitive. We need to reduce the cost of energy in manufacturing. We've thought about it. We are addressing these things in our program and in our manifesto, so that they could be, they could produce more efficiently and more cost effectively. Our markets to raise our living standards are not internal markets.
I'm glad you mentioned energy. My next question will be about the energy sector, and we'll do that after this short break. We take headlines now. Don't go away. After all, this is Newsline Live.
Newsfirst, Newsline with Faraz, Shauketaly.
And welcome back to Newsline Live. We're in conversation with Mr. Eran Wickramaratne. Mr. Wickramaratne, you mentioned energy, and my mind immediately went to this CEB, because ever since I think 1996 perhaps, when they introduced a company and brought on board emergency power, the CEB has spent a small fortune plus one on emergency power, and it's a crying shame that between that time and now, at least 24 years, We don't appear to own any emergency power units ourselves. It's always being taken out on hire. Various people are being enriched, and the people are suffering. Why is there a lack of this planning? What will the SJB do about this? This is one sector that's really, really corrupt.
Yes, so in our future plan, we have national security as one, health security as another, food security, and we have energy security. We have put energy quite high.
Oh, so there you go. You've answered my 3 questions,
Yes.
but it's actually 4 items
Yes,
now.
so this is a very important thing, and you are right, cost needs to be brought down. What you said is correct in terms of, emergency power and the unsatisfactory situation. So we have a situation in which the production, the distribution, and even the regulation sometimes seems to be all mixed up. We have to basically break this up. Regulation must completely be separate from distribution and from production. And that needs to be strengthened because regulatory arms are weak, and we recognize that it needs to be strengthened. And we have to deal with the issue, and you are right, both governments from both parties have failed.
Absolutely.
Have failed, and we need to recognize that. We need to break through that. We need to make sure that the costs are brought down. We need to make sure that we don't resolve so much to emergency power, but the long-term plan is put in place. We need to make sure that energy, solar energy, for example, and that policy is carried out. It was reversed more recently, and I think as we go forward over the next 5 years, I'm sure that technology is moving at such a fast pace that basically conserving solar energy generated power through use of batteries and
will be much cheaper.
Much cheaper, and with graphene being used, I think it will become a reality.
Good. What else? What other tactical moves will your party make to ensure that it is your party that will be forming the government?
Yeah, so it's as I said, one was the team, one is a program. The macroeconomy must be fixed quickly. There is a liquidity issue, right? We will work with the international community, that's for sure. We'll work with our traditional partners, India, China, the US, the European Union, Japan.
Japan seems to be left out currently.
No, Japan. We will work with them. So financial markets and the economy is largely dependent on trust that people have. And we have a past track record of building that trust. We were able to get GSP Plus. We were able to basically get the European Union to remove the ban on fish, on basically our fish being exported into those countries. We will build on that. Then we will also work on basically getting some debt moratoria internationally, work with the different partners, World Bank,
IMF. Is that looking increasingly necessary now?
It is. It's going to be absolutely necessary, because in 2021 and in 2022, only Sri Lanka will face its biggest challenge on debt repayment.
What about the money that was due this year?
Yeah, what is due this year, they will be able to pay it because last year we had reserves of about in excess of $7 billion, and the debt payments can be made. There's one more big payment in October that can be done, but next year is the challenge. So creating the framework, building on your international relationships, renegotiating on your debt, creating the macroeconomic environment and understanding that you will pursue certain policies will also give the rating agencies some level of comfort and stability. So that's why I said the 2-year recovery period, and then you will get into the growth period after that.
I'm sure that collectively owners and stakeholders in the tourism industry must have rushed to the toilet at the moment because you've just told them a home truth that it's going to take 2 years plus. What are they going to do in the meantime? Thousands of people are working in that industry.
Yeah, Faraz, if you want to solve any problem, you need to first know the truth and face the truth. Then always you will be able to come up with an answer, right? But if you try to pretend that things are different to what they actually are, you're going to put the business in trouble, you're going to put the financial system in trouble as well. Once they have understood it, that is why we are giving them not just the moratorium and the grace period, but also extending the loan repayments. I'm suggesting at least 10 years, because I see this as a much bigger problem than people are really making it out to be. And we need to be realistic when we get into this. There are many other things that can be done in the economy. When we look at agriculture, for example, right, we have to look at value addition. Generally, the discussion during an election is about either the seed quality or about fertilizer. We have to get out of that. The government has to intervene in technology, providing technology. If you look at industry, apart from bringing the cost of electricity down for industry, we have lots of small and medium industries in this country. We have to look at how do they grow, how do they expand their market, how do we take them to export market. Government has to have a plan, because a small person can't do that. Providing technology is one, access to markets and the cost of access. That is something that a government must intervene in, and government can do it. What we are is a middle income country, Faraz, and we may be stuck in the middle income trap, right, unless we are able to really see through this and break through this. In a middle income country, most of your export revenues come generally from a few large companies, right? When you become a higher middle income country and are beginning to move into the upper income countries, that structure has to change. Small and medium industries have to become basically sell more in the national market, but more in the international market. That we have to break through, and we have to do that. Education will have to play a big role in it, because if you're going to value add, then your skill levels have to also climb with that. So in terms of social expenditures, we have to put it in education.
There is some good news on the horizon, announced a couple of hours ago, when the British Foreign and Commonwealth Office announced that Sri Lanka has been removed from is exempt from the list of non-essential travel advisory, meaning that British people, if they wish to travel to Sri Lanka, can. Of course, our airport needs to be open, but that's a tiny little glimmer of hope. After all, a lot of British visitors do travel into Sri Lanka. So those are slow processes. Is this going to be sustained? In your view, is the government doing enough in terms of the COVID matter?
So we are already, since the COVID breakout, we're already 6 to 8 months into it, right? And I think that this process, as I said, will go on for 2 years. It's welcome news to have that, because it at least begins to open the door. So it's India, it's Britain, right? Then it's China, then it's Germany, and then it's France. These are the 5 countries from which most of our tourists come. And so that is really welcome news.
In the last minute, let me ask you this question. I'm sure it's on everybody's mind. Now, you're very confident that the SJB will be able to form the next government. And so this leads to a slight conundrum, doesn't it? Does it not? How are you going to cope with the president? How are you going to work with President Rajapaksa?
We won't cope with the president. We will work with the president.
Right.
And I mean that seriously. What we will do is, the president has been a professional, he's new to politics, right? And I would presume that he would have an open mind. We would agree or pre-agree on a work program with President Gotabaya Rajapaksa. What is the work program? What are the priorities in the recovery phase? What are the priorities for the growth phase? What are the changes that need to be done in the economy? We will pre-agree on the program, one. The second thing we will do is, we will pre-agree on having a scientifically based cabinet of ministers, not looking at faces and political interest and so forth. And I think President Gotabaya Rajapaksa and we will be on the same page on that. Scientifically draw up the cabinet, not have institutions and subjects that are all mixed up and messed up. And some work is going on, the background work going on, and I think that it may be possible to actually confine it to about 20 cabinet ministers. And the third point...
Are you all having discussions with the president?
Not with the president. We have no discussions. These are internally, we are preparing...
Within your party?
Within our party, we are preparing basically for government. And the third point is, we will pay particular attention to the issues of execution, because execution is critical, and I think President Gotabaya Rajapaksa understands that as well, and we will have common ground on that as well, on execution and making it efficient and basically reducing bureaucratic inefficiencies so that the private sector gets helped by the public sector.
Ram Vikramatne, thank you very much for being on NewsLine Live, and all the very best in your quest to make Sri Lanka #1 again. On that note, thank you, take care, great evening, wonderful weekend, and God bless.